Armies in other parts of the world have called on the U.S. Army and other armed forces for platforms and ordnance. This as the U.S. military ponders its own supplies, readiness, and the overriding question of the capacity and resilience of that defense industrial base, the DIB. For an update on what's going on at the Army Materiel Command, we turn to its Deputy Commander, Lieutenant General Chris Mohan. General Mohan, good to have you back.
Hey, Tom. It's really good to be here today.
And this whole DIB issue, has arisen because of the difficulty, on the Navy side of getting their ships built, but also on the supplies of the basic ordnance, the howitzer shells and so forth, and the platforms to launch them. What does it look like from your point of view right now?
I think we have to remember a couple things. One, we are part of the global supply chain. It's very easy to start thinking that in terms of, we've got a military supply chain that just supplies military hardware. But that is not the case. The companies that supply us with castings and forgings, for example, are the same companies that supply John Deere, International Harvester, and some of the bigger, manufacturers, Caterpillar, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to be cognizant of the trends and some of the challenges that they have that will, have roll-down effects to us as well. The other piece that we have to think through is how we clearly communicate our demands to industry. And I think we do a pretty good job of that using, what we call as our operational tempo, using the historical data that we have for our fleets. But then there's anomalies in the system. An anomaly was COVID, where we had a global shutdown in reality that caused the bottlenecks that you saw sitting off the coast of the United States. They caused slowdowns in distribution around the globe and also here in the United States. We're a part of that, and so we were impacted by that. And then you have another spike in requirements, which was our support to our partners in the Ukraine. I know that's been a topic of big interest, and it put a significant amount of stress on our supply chain, and we are reacting and getting ahead of it. But it's been a challenge for us.
In the case of something like casting shops make all different sizes and shapes of castings, when it comes to, say, something like a 155 millimeter shell there, that is a specific thing that lots of armies use. And so, therefore, you're competing not with the other needs in the United States for casting capacity, but for worldwide needs of that particular item. So I guess my question is, that is also supplied by the organic industrial base of the United States, but also foreign countries make the same compatible type of item, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And in some cases, it's a combination of both. So for some of our munitions rounds in particular, different companies make different components, and then they come to an industrial base OIB facility for the LAP process, load assemble pack, which is the final process of putting the round together, testing it, packaging it, and then sending it out for distribution across the Army. It's a combination in a lot of cases.
And by the way, what about small arms rounds? Is that the same situation, or is that pretty good in terms of supply capacity right now?
Yeah, so we've done very well with small arms ammunition based upon the long-standing relationship we have with a commercial vendor that operates Lake City Ammunition Plant. So that's been a long-standing organization that is very well suited to ramp up and ramp down from a production standpoint.
Because in that situation, you compete with the consumer market of all things. And I remember a couple of years ago, small arms rounds were like 80 cents a piece when people were used to 15 cents a piece. And it was, a situation.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so the company that operates Lake City for us, they ramp up and ramp down production based upon the market. What our demands are, they come first. We're first in line. And then the residuals and other production, it goes to the private market. And again, that's one that we've done very well with in this past ramp up of not only increasing the number of units that we send to Europe in response to the Russian invasion, but also the amount of military material we have provided to our Ukrainian partners. And then there's another piece to it, Tom, that also is great news for our weapons and, for the effectiveness of our weapons based upon what our partners and allies are seeing as the results that the Ukrainians have had using our weapon systems on the battlefield. We've seen a significant increase in demand in the defense industrial base for U.S. supplied weapons, through contracts, foreign military sales, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good news story on one end. On the other end, it's placing additional pressure on the organic industrial base and the entire supply system.
We're speaking with Lieutenant General Chris Mohan, Deputy Commander of the Army Materiel Command. And just switching gears here, you have two hats actually in your position. You're also Redstone Arsenal Senior Commander. That means there's a lot of real estate going on down there. What is the latest?
Well, I will tell you that, for background, this is the fourth time I've been a senior commander. And this by far is the most dynamic installation that I have been privileged to serve on, because we're more than an Army post. We're very proud of us being a federal center of excellence. And if you look at the 45,000 people that work here, it is not just people who work for the Department of Defense. We are the lion's share, but we have a long, long history of working with NASA, and the Marshall Space Flight Center is a critical partner in what we do for our national defense. But also we have a growing relationship and footprint of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've long had the Department of Justice here with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, which is, part of the explosive ordnance disposal piece. All those guys get trained here. But then you put a significant training load from the FBI. It's just going to continue to build out that federal center of excellence. And it's a huge win for us and the local community as well. It's very exciting.
And tell us about the proliferated warfare space architecture. What is that and what's going on with it?
The proliferated space warfare architecture. I would say that when you look at the folks that we have here from Space and Missile Defense Command, the Missile Defense Agency, and now, MISSIC has always been here. We have a significant number of partners who are deeply involved in not only ballistic missile defense, but also development of offensive weapons. The RICTO, the Rapid Capabilities Technology Office, is leading the Army's effort to field hypersonic weapons. So we are not just terrestrial anymore from an Army standpoint. We are extraterrestrial, if you want to use an ugly term. So it is not just ground-based aviation. It is all the way to space. And a significant portion of that research and development is happening in the greater Tennessee Valley.
Yeah, so that creates another kind of cross bridge in the joint effort, because there is a Space Command now, and so that's somewhat separate from the Air Force, not entirely. And I guess that must make for some complicated meeting setups.
Yeah. So yesterday, I attended the change of command and retirement of a friend of mine, Dan Karbler, who turned over Space and Missile Defense Command after 4 years in command. And it was the first time I've ever been to a change of command that had two ceremonies. So he had the Army Chief of Staff. We had the Army Chief of Staff here who did the change of command for the Army component, SMDC. And then General Dickinson from Space Command was here, who did the change of command for the JFCC, the Joint Force Ballistic Missile Defense, which is another element that is headquartered here. And so it was, again, the first time I've ever seen a dual change of command. That speaks to the complexity of some of the operations that are taking place here.
Well, glad to hear that Dan Karbler finally got to retire. I guess some of these things were held up, because of the politics in Washington, because he's been on the show too, and so we wish him well in retirement. But,
he's a wonderful human being.
You bet. And getting back just to that supply chain issue, I guess my question is, how do the different components of the military talk to one another about it? I mean, is it a concerted effort? Because you're buying different things than the Air Force, which is buying different things than the Navy. But it all comes down to, as you point out, the energetics, the castings, the casings, all the electronics that go into a lot of these things. So there's a common industrial base as you break it down from the finished product.
Yeah, and within the munitions portfolio, we're exceedingly joint. We have the Joint Munitions Command, which is one of our subordinates. Our ammunition depots, like the depot I commanded out in Utah, we stored a significant portion of Marine Corps ammunition. We were doing work for Navy shipborne air defense systems. That's very, very joint. Within the repair parts and other consumables, that's also very joint, but that is we all tie in and plug in and put our demands on the Defense Logistics Agency. And so they provide a significant portion of our repair parts, for example, as they do for the Marine Corps and the Navy and the Air Force. So we talk to our sister services, but more so we talk to the Defense Logistics Agency. Highlight the fact that we are a federal center of excellence here, and then the fact that while we see challenges in the supply chain and the pressure we are seeing in the supply chain, for example, we are doing more things with Bradley fighting vehicles right now than any time I've seen in my career. That is from a standpoint of how many units we have rotating into Atlantic Resolve, CTC rotations. We are transitioning from